My beloved children, listen closely, for this is not a tale of wealth or power, but of a promise whispered in hunger, carried through decades, and returned when hair had turned gray and hands had grown weak. In the winter of 1952, in a forgotten corner of rural Kentucky, there stood a wooden house leaning slightly to the east, as if it had grown tired of standing straight. The wind slipped through the cracks in its walls, and the frost crept across the single window like a quiet visitor who never knocked. Inside that house lived a boy named Samuel Carter, 12 years old, thin as a reed, with eyes that had learned to watch the world carefully. Samuel's father had died too, years earlier in a coal mine collapse near Hazard. His mother followed not long after, taken by pneumonia when medicine was a luxury they could not afford. By Christmas of 1952, Samuel had no one left. He slept on a straw mattress, wrapped in a coat that once belonged to his father, and learned to ignore the ache in his stomach the way others learned to ignore the ticking of a clock. One evening in January 1953, as the sun disappeared behind the Appalachian Hills, Samuel walked along the frozen dirt road toward town. He did not know exactly why he walked. Hunger often moved his feet when hope no longer could. His boots were cracked, his fingers numb, and his breath rose in small white clouds that vanished as quickly as they formed. Near the old railway crossing, he saw a man collapsed beside the tracks. The man was older, perhaps in his late 50s, dressed in a thin coat not meant for winter. His face was pale, his lips trembling. A small leather bag lay beside him, dusted with snow. Samuel stopped. Fear tugged at him. He had learned that survival often required walking past trouble. Yet something heavier than fear settled in his chest. He knelt down and touched the man's shoulder. "Mister," Samuel whispered. The man's eyes fluttered open. They were kind eyes, worn by years of labor. "Son," the man said faintly, "I think I misjudged the cold." Samuel helped him sit up, though his own arms shook with the effort. The man coughed, a deep, rattling sound that echoed in the empty evening. "My name is Thomas Whitaker," the man said after a moment. "I was traveling to Louisville, missed the last train." Samuel hesitated. He had no firewood left at home. Only half a loaf of bread remained, hard around the edges. But he spoke anyway. "My house is not far," Samuel said. "It's warm enough." It was not warm, but it was shelter. That night, Samuel shared his bread, breaking it carefully so the pieces looked equal. He boiled water and added the last of his dried beans. Thomas ate slowly, as if ashamed of his hunger, and watched the boy with quiet wonder. "Why would you help a stranger when you have so little?" Thomas asked Samuel stared into the pot. "Because if I don't," he said, "no one will." Thomas stayed 3 nights. Samuel gathered extra firewood from the edge of the forest. He gave Thomas his father's coat at night, pretending he did not need it. On the 4th morning, the weather softened. The trains ran again before leaving. Thomas reached into his leather bag and pulled out a few folded bills. Samuel shook his head immediately. "I can't take that." Thomas insisted, then stopped. He studied the boy's face carefully. "Then let me make you a promise," Thomas said. "Someday, when I am able, I will repay what you've given me. I swear it." Samuel smiled faintly. "You don't have to." Thomas placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "I will, even if it takes half a lifetime." They parted near the tracks. Samuel watched until the train became a dark line against the snow. Years passed. By 1960, Samuel was 18 and working long days at a sawmill near Lexington. His hands grew rough, his shoulders strong. He slept in a shared room and sent what little money he saved to a church that helped orphaned children. Though he never told anyone why, he married in 1968 a quiet woman named Ruth, who listened more than she spoke. Together, they raised 2 children in a small brick house built with borrowed money and stubborn hope. Life was not generous, but it was honest. Sometimes, late at night, Samuel remembered the man by the tracks. He wondered if Thomas Whitaker still lived, if the promise had faded like so many others spoken in desperation. Samuel never waited for it. Promises given freely do not demand return. In 1985, Ruth fell ill. Hospital bills piled high. Samuel worked overtime until his back protested and his eyes burned. When Ruth passed in the autumn of that year, Samuel stood alone beside her grave in the Lexington cemetery, holding a promise he had never spoken aloud: to endure. By 2003, Samuel's hair had turned silver. His children had families of their own. He lived simply, waking early, tending a small garden, attending church every Sunday without fail on an April morning, as dogwood blossoms opened like quiet prayers. There was a knock on Samuel's door. A man stood outside, tall, well-dressed, his face lined but familiar in a way that stirred something deep. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," the man said. "I've been looking for you for years." Samuel frowned slightly. "I'm afraid you have the wrong house." Daniel shook his head. "My father was Thomas Whitaker. He told me a story before he died in 1999 about a boy who saved his life in the winter of 1953. Samuel felt the world grow still. "He never forgot," Daniel continued. "He searched for you, but records were lost. Before he passed, he made me promise to finish what he began." Daniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. Thick and heavy. Samuel did not open it. "I didn't help for this," Samuel said quietly. Daniel nodded. "I know, but some promises are not about payment. They are about honoring the truth of who we became because of you." Samuel's hands trembled slightly as he held the envelope. Not from greed, but from the weight of time returning to him. The wind moved through the dogwood trees, gentle and unhurried, as if it had all the patience in the world. Samuel invited Daniel inside, not out of obligation, but because something long unfinished had gently knocked on his door, and he had opened it without fear. They sat at the small wooden table where Samuel had eaten his meals alone for many years. The kettle whistled softly, and steam rose like a quiet prayer. Daniel placed the envelope on the table between them. He did not push it closer. "My father never spoke of that winter without his voice changing," Daniel said. "He said the cold nearly took his life, but kindness brought him back." Samuel listened without interrupting. He had learned over a lifetime that some words need space to land. Inside the envelope was not just money. There were documents, a deed, a letter written in a careful, aging hand. The letter was dated June 12, 1998, written 1 year before Thomas Whitaker passed away. Samuel unfolded it slowly. "Samuel, if these words reach you, then time has done what distance could not. I have carried your face with me for 45 years. You were poor in all the ways that mattered least, and rich in the one way that mattered most. I built a business. I raised a family. And every step I took, I remembered that I lived because a boy chose compassion over fear. What I give now is not repayment. It is a continuation." Samuel's eyes blurred, not from sorrow, but from a fullness he had not expected. Daniel explained that the deed belonged to a small apartment building in Lexington, purchased years earlier and placed in trust. The rental income had been quietly supporting a scholarship fund for orphaned children since 1980. "My father wanted your name on it," Daniel said, "but he wanted you to choose." Samuel leaned back in his chair. Outside, the world went on. Cars passed. Birds argued in the trees, but inside, time seemed to fold gently inward. That evening, Samuel walked alone through the neighborhood. He passed the church where he had sat in the same pew for decades. He remembered the boy he had been, counting beans, measuring bread, giving without calculation. He knelt beside his bed that night and spoke softly, not to the past, but to the one who had walked with him unseen. In the weeks that followed, Samuel met with Daniel often. Papers were signed. Decisions were made with care. Samuel did not change his home, his clothes, or his habits. He changed only one thing. He began to visit the scholarship recipients. In September 2004, at a community center near downtown Lexington, Samuel met a young girl named Clara, age 10, recently orphaned, frightened, and stubbornly quiet. She clutched her backpack as if it were armor. Samuel knelt to her height. "You don't owe anyone anything," he told her. "Just live well." Clara looked at him the way Samuel once looked at Thomas Whitaker. Years passed again, but differently now. In 2015, Samuel's health began to fail. His steps slowed, his breath shortened, but his eyes remained clear. On a bright morning in April 2018, Samuel returned to the old railway crossing. The tracks were no longer used, the station abandoned. Wildflowers grew where people once hurried. Samuel stood quietly. Leaning on his cane, he spoke aloud, not loudly, but truthfully. The promise was kept. That night, Samuel lay in his bed, the window open, the air mild. He dreamed not of trains or winters, but of warmth, shared warmth. When dawn came, Samuel did not rise. Those who came later said his face was peaceful, as though he had simply stepped into another room. The scholarship fund continued. Clara grew up. She became a nurse in Louisville, known for sitting long after her shift ended with patients who had no visitors. Promises do not end when hands grow still. They travel, they multiply, they return, not always to the giver, but to the world that once received them. May you understand this, my beloved children. What is given in love is never lost. Amen.